The Louie T Network is powered by MusicHead University. MusicHeads, classes in session. Turn me up. Enroll on YouTube now. Link is in the description.
Who else could it be but me, your man, Louie T? Welcome to the Command Post Live. You know what it is. Post up. Take command. I, of course, am your Commander-in-Chief, Louie T. Thank you for joining me. So, a couple of topics I wanted to get to tonight. Really interesting stuff from John Keim over the last few days as we get into the dog days of the offseason here. And I had a list last week that talked about things that the Commanders, 7 things that the Commanders needed to improve upon in the upcoming season if they were to maximize this upcoming season and look to either meet or exceed their win total from last year, right? So it got me to thinking on the polar opposite of that spectrum. What are some things that the Commanders can't rely on in the upcoming season? Things that went their way in 2024 that you're hoping that they happen for you in 2025, but you shouldn't be looking for that. You shouldn't be relying on that if you're the Commanders. We'll talk about those things tonight. But before we get to that, John Keim wrote an article today, or I believe it was, I think it was released today. Might have been yesterday. And it was an article talking about 5 players that were, playing for potential contracts next season. And so I read the article, and a lot of this information, I think it's safe to say that we've had conversations about each of these players before, probably individually, and what their situation was. We didn't necessarily get into the meat and potatoes of it per se, which is why I felt like the John Keim article was so useful, because it actually got into more of the particulars, the minutia that I really wanted to stay away from, because I wasn't 100% sure about some of the numbers. But he went and searched and grabbed some of those numbers for us. So we're going to talk about that now. And I want to pull up the article for you and talk about it. And I'm going to give you some of the tidbits of it. So we make it a little bit bigger. And we'll go from there. So let me add this to the stream. And here we go. So all right, so 5 Commanders who could strike it rich in 2026. This is from John Keim. And the first guy on the list, as you can see, is Deebo Samuel. Now, we've talked about him and what we think this season represents for him as far as being a commander into the future. Now, there's no guarantee that he won't be back here next year. It just feels like a 5th-round pick that was sent to San Francisco was a rental situation for Washington as they try to push forward and make themselves as competitive as they can while not expending resources for the future. So again, this move, trading for Deebo, who's in a contract year, which is sort of that carrot you're dangling out in front of his face, is motivation for him to go out and give you a massive season. You pay him, and then you could be in a Deebo Samuel situation, which he got paid big time money in San Francisco after the I believe it was the 2021 season, might have been 2022, and he really didn't perform well afterwards. Or you could look at it from a Daron Payne standpoint, where he had a breakout season the year he was slated to get paid, and we haven't seen that type of production since. Either way, it feels like Deebo Samuel is here on a rental. So this article reads, when it pertains to Deebo Samuel, Kime writes, the Commanders did not negotiate an extension with Samuel after trading a 5th-round pick to the 49ers for him in this offseason. They converted his $15.43 million, $15.43 million of his existing base salary into signing bonus and added 4 voidable years to spread the cap hit. He'll only count $5.1 million against the cap this season. So he goes on to add, the Commanders like the situation Samuel is in, knowing he needs to prove himself if he wants another big deal. Samuel then says, quote, I've got to make the best out of every opportunity I get. So I don't see this as an opportunity for him necessarily to get his money here. I see this as an opportunity for him to potentially get his money elsewhere. I can't see Deebo signing a 1-year deal to remain here next year. And I don't see this team, unless Deebo absolutely blacks out. And even if he does that, it's still hard for me to believe that they're going to want to pay a 30-year-old wide receiver big money when they're already about to break a 30-year-old wide receiver off with big money in Terry McLaurin. I just don't think the two are equal. And in this particular situation, I think they're renting Samuel. Maybe they look to draft the position next year. That will give them some cheap labor and a guy that they can have alongside Terry moving forward. But I think Samuel just bought them an extra year because they only had 5 draft picks, right? So there was only so much they could do. And I feel like trading for him bought them an extra year, also gave them an experienced veteran that they could try to win with now, while some of their younger receivers, i.e. Jalen Lane, a rookie, and Luke McCaffrey, a second-year player, gain more experience. And then maybe you can lean on those guys more as you bring in another young guy into the fold next year. Or you could even hit the free agent market next year if someone were to come available. But this feels like an opportunity for them to get one good year out of him and move on. We'll see what happens with that situation. Next guy up is Brian Robinson Jr. So we've talked about B-Rob as a guy that we just can't see any way possible being back in Washington next year. It feels like this is his last year here. Whatever we get from him, we get. I can't see him all of a sudden, a guy that has never rushed for more than 800 yards in his career, all of a sudden going off for 1,500 yards and 18 touchdowns in a contract year. Not when you're splitting time with Austin Eckler. And now there's a new, running back in town that I think is going to also take some of the workload off of his plate and Bill, right? So we'll see, right? But John Kime writes, he too is in the final year of a rookie contract. In his first 3 seasons, Robinson has rushed for 2,329 yards and 15 touchdowns, averaging 4.1 yards per carry. The Commanders drafted Ja'Cory Crosby-Merritt in the 7th round. It's way too soon to consider him Robinson's eventual replacement, but regardless, the 4th-year back needs a strong season. He is yet to rush for more than 800 yards in a season. He then goes on to say, He should have a stronger offensive line to open holes in the last 9 games of the season, which included the postseason. Robinson had 6 games where he averaged 1.4 yards or less before contact. The league average was 2.67. So there was definitely a struggle there with the offensive line, but he also didn't maximize runs either. We've talked about that. Nagging injuries have hindered him the past 2 seasons. The quote from B-Rob, the biggest thing for me is to be available. I'm hell when I'm well. We talked about that quote from him a couple weeks ago. Daron Payne. This is a guy that a lot of fans are leery of. We talked about Daron Payne extensively, more than any of these other 4 guys that are on this list, because a lot of you are still suffering from PTSD with Daron Payne, right? Daron had the 2022 season, and we just haven't seen it since, right? Kime writes, Payne has 1 year left on his contract. It will count $28 million on the cap in 2026. However, they could save $16.8 million in cap space if they released him after the season. So remember, I talked about the John Allen 2 warning shots, pop, pop in the air, and how that might have affected him this offseason in terms of leadership and motivation. But also, Kime said something pretty interesting earlier in the offseason when he said, maybe this is a situation where Daron Payne has always been in the shadow of John Allen. Allen's no longer here. He can kind of step out of the shadow into the spotlight and kind of be his own player instead of always being, because again, 9 times out of 10, when you talk about Daron Payne, you talked about Daron Payne and Jonathan Allen. You talked about the Bama wall. It was rarely that we just isolated Payne and just talked about him. It was always like a package deal with those two. Maybe Payne finally being on his own, not having the shadow of John Allen. This goes all the way back to college, as we talked about. Maybe this might be really healthy for him. It's really good for him. We won't know until the season happens, but there are a lot of people that are leery of paying Daron Payne again based off of what happened the last time. Speaking of which, Payne's contract was an issue in 2022, but he recorded a career high 11.5 sacks, as we know, and earned a 4-year extension worth up to $90 million. He has a combined 8 sacks the last 2 seasons since said extension. So that's the thing that has a lot of Commanders fans like, nah, we're not doing that again, right? However, the Commanders privately and publicly have lauded his offseason. Multiple people in the organization singled him out during OTA work, also saying he appears more relaxed and a little more outgoing. We talked about Joe Witt having to, tell him to chill, essentially. But Witt says he's leading by example, and this year you can really see him taking that leadership role and taking it the next step. He's been that guy, just really stood out to me the most. He's been the guy that's really just stood out to me the most, he said. Close quote from Joe Witt Jr., the defensive coordinator. So Daron Payne is a guy that definitely is in that conversation. Laremy Tunsil. So obviously trade for Tunsil in the offseason, and he makes it abundantly clear that he would like a new contract. Commanders know where he stands, and he knows where they stand. And so the question is, will something get done this year or next year? I was of the mindset at the beginning of this process when we first traded for him, knowing that he had a very affordable contract for the next 2 years, and he's his own agent. I was under the assumption that you would let him play out this first year just to make sure that you signed up for the Laremy Tunsil that's a 5-time Pro Bowler and doesn't seem like he's slowing down anytime soon. However, it's been brought to my attention. Shout out to my guy, Derek B, and others, but Derek B in particular, who's like, look, we know how this works. Don't wait. Don't be the Dallas Cowboys and wait to the last minute and the price goes up. You see what's going on with Michael Parsons right now. If TJ Watt gets paid and he gets paid more than Myles Garrett, that price, the price of the pack just went up. Today's price is not tomorrow's price. So the longer you wait, the more you put yourself in a position to have to pay even more money for a guy. If you expect Laremy Tunsil to be the guy you traded for, you just pay him now. Why wait? It's not getting any cheaper. And as we know with tackles, even though he's on the wrong side of 30, with tackles, they can play well into their 30s and hell, even into their 40s if you take care of your body. Trent Williams, I think, is 36, about to turn 37, and he's talking about playing 3 or 4 more years. We've seen it. We see it all the time, right? Andrew Whitworth, Jason Peters, guys that take care of their body can play into their late 30s, into their 40s. He's just turning 30. So there's plenty of time for Laremy Tunsil to continue to be one of the better tackles in football. I think he's, what, 32? Let me see. Let me check his age before I say he's just turning 30. Laremy Tunsil's age. Yeah, he's 30 years old. I thought he was. So he'll be 31 in August, though. But still, you feel comfortable with him and where he is. If you feel good about him, pay him, right? Extend him. Kime writes, Tunsil has 2 years left on his contract, and it's hard to imagine him playing poorly enough to force Washington to cut him after the season. If the Commanders did, they would have no dead money on their cap. But for a 5-time Pro Bowler, he's prohibitively affordable in 2026 with a cap hit of only $21.5 million. Currently 14th among offensive tackles. Washington drafted tackle Josh Connolly in the first round. And he will play on the right side, and at some point he could shift to the left side of the offensive line. Still, the bigger question for Tunsil is what kind of extension would he receive if he plays as they anticipate this offseason or this season. After all, the Commanders could have their bookend tackles for a while, providing high-level protection for Jaden Daniels. Quote, Laremy has a very, very exceptional skill set, Washington offensive line O-line Bobby Johnson said. He brings a lot of talent, but also that knowledge. Josh is very talented, a lot of upside. I'm excited to see when we put those two together how Laramy's experience can accelerate Josh's growth, close quote. That from O-line Bobby Johnson. So Laremy Tunsil is a guy that I could easily see at the end of this summer, early September, getting an extension similar to Sam Cosmi right before the start of the season. And then Marshon Lattimore, another guy that we traded for this time during the season last season, right? Lattimore has no guaranteed money remaining on the final 2 years of his deal. He'll count $18 million versus the cap in 25 and $18.5 in 26. If he's cut after the season, there would be no dead money on Washington's salary cap. We've talked about Marshon Lattimore in particular. This is a make or break season for him. If he plays well, I've got a feeling they're going to do what they just did for Deebo Samuel. Give him a bunch of upfront guaranteed money, stretch out the base salary, and have him just play out. I don't see him getting any type of extension here in Washington. I just don't. Similar to Deebo Samuel. I think this is a guy that they would love to have here for the next 2 years. Will allow Trey Amos to develop into a number 1 corner. You can draft another young guy next year, right? Just like receiver. And now you've got a young corner that has gotten experience that you feel good about. And again, if you have to hit the open market to go get a 1-year rental guy like you did this year in Jonathan Jones, you can do that while the young rookie develops, right? And by the time he's ready to hit the field, you've got a young nucleus of corners and Amos, rookie, and Mike Sainristil, right? I can't imagine Lattimore's here past 2026. It feels like ideally, in an ideal world, he'd stay here for the next 2 years. You draft a young guy next year that doesn't have to necessarily start, right? In year 2, that guy is ready to jump in there. Lattimore's no longer here. You got Trey Amos, you got Mike Sainristil, and now you got a young nucleus of guys in your secondary, right? That's the ideal situation. But again, Marshon did not impress last year. We know there were, extenuating circumstances. We'll see what happens this year. He's healthy. He says he feels good. Let's continue on reading what Keim wrote. He says, Washington traded picks in the 3rd, 4th, and 6th rounds to New Orleans for Lattimore and a 5th-round pick on November 5th, but a hamstring injury limited it to 2 regular season games and all 3 playoff contests. Lattimore had games where teams, New Orleans and Detroit, didn't challenge him, and others where teams attacked him, Tampa Bay and Philadelphia. He needs a stronger showing, not to mention stay healthy, as he's only played in 26 games combined the past 3 years. That's his biggest issue. He can't stay healthy. And if he can do that this year, I think he's going to be just fine for us. I've said that all along. If he's healthy, I got no worries and no doubts about what he can provide for us. If he gets injured, then he becomes a liability like he was last year. Quote, he's coming back with a chip on his shoulder, close quote. Washington defensive pass game coordinator Jason Simmons said. He goes on to also say he wants to get back to the form he has played his entire career, close quote. Lattimore said during minicamp that he felt great. He said that he had more bursts out of his break and that he feels, quote, explosive. He said after watching his film from last year that he played timid based on his movement skills. Lattimore said he never felt like himself in Washington because of the hamstring injury. Multiple members of the organization say they anticipate a different Lattimore thanks to a healed hamstring and a full year in the defensive system. Lattimore says, I feel way better than last year, closed quote. So those are the 5 guys that Keim wrote in his article that are looking for a payday. And obviously there are other players who are free agents. The Commanders, I believe, have 27 guys, I believe, that will be free agents after the season. Very similar to last year. I think it was 27 last year. I think it's 20 this year, right? Something of that, something to that effect. Because again, a lot of 1-year deals, a lot of guys with expiring contracts that are, on rookie deals, Percy Butler, Brian Robinson Jr., et cetera, et cetera. So, we'll see what those guys are able to do. But those 5 in particular, they have something to prove. They have something to play for. And again, that could be a huge motivating factor, right? Huge motivating factor. So now I want to get to 7 things the Commanders can't rely on in 2025. Last year was a phenomenal season, and there were so many things that transpired in 2024. And we were very fortunate to have some things go our way. We were unfortunate in certain situations not to have things go our way. That's the nature of the beast. It's the nature of sports and the NFL in particular. And so we ended up with the record that we were supposed to have, right? Whether you believe that or not. But ultimately, there were some things that definitely helped aid and abet the Commanders in their 12-5 regular season record. And I don't necessarily know if these things benefited them in the postseason as much as it did the regular season. But in order to get to the postseason, you got to get through the regular season first. And these are 7 things I'm not sure that if you're a Commanders fan, you should be looking for this team to be able to rely on for a second consecutive season. Now, again, there's no guarantees that these things won't transpire again. And we're hoping that a lot of these things go in our favor yet again. But I wouldn't bank on it if I were you. I'm not banking on these things happening again, which is why you put different measures in place to be a better football team so that some of these things you don't have to necessarily rely on. But you'd like to see some of these things occur again. I start with number 7. Opposing teams' injury misfortune. All right. The ops injury misfortune last year really benefited the Commanders. I went through and I listed every single game, and I did a little chart. And of the 17 regular season games, 7 of them you could argue, again, there's no right or wrong here. You could look at it from whatever lens you like. But 7 of these games I felt like were affected because of opponent injury misfortune. And look, injuries are a part of the game. Everybody's got to deal with them, but certain injuries impact games more than others, and certain players not playing impact games more than others, right? Case in point, week 2, Giants, they lose their place kicker on the opening kickoff of the game. They have no one to kick extra points, no one to attempt field goals. Look, we didn't want to hear it then, and I don't want to hear it now, but ultimately, that did help shape and mold the outcome of a game in which we couldn't seem to find the end zone due to penalties and mistakes on our part. We had to win that game with 7 field goals, a luxury the Giants did not have because they couldn't kick field goals because they didn't have a field goal kicker. So that was a big one in week 2, obviously. You go to week 6, or excuse me, week 7. I don't really think this would have changed the outcome of this game, but Andy Dalton was the starter in week 7. Now, if you put yourself back in week 7, we were more afraid of Andy Dalton than Bryce Young at that time. We would have preferred Bryce Young play in that game. But Andy Dalton can't move. He can't run. He was a sitting duck back there in the pocket. Bryce Young can at least move and scramble. Who knows? He probably would have been sacked. He might have made mistakes. The outcome probably would have been the same. But Bryce Young not being out there, especially the Bryce Young we saw at the end of 2024, him not being out there made that a much easier contest for the Commanders to take advantage of. You didn't go to week 12 against the Dallas Cowboys. Both games against the Cowboys, we didn't see Dak Prescott. We've had trouble with Dak Prescott throughout his career. And even though we still lost that game, and I just want you to keep in mind that just because a quarterback didn't struggle against us doesn't mean he's not ass or that team isn't compromised. It just means our defense is ass, which it was last year. We struggled with Cooper Rush in that game. But we should have been able to win that game. If our offense would have played better, you know, the special teams gave us a lift. They give it, they take it away in that game. Obviously, they blocked a field goal. They blocked a punt in that game, but then they gave up 2 kickoff returns, and we missed 2 extra points. So the special teams give it, they take it away in that game. But the offense had ample opportunities to put Dallas out of their misery in that game, and they didn't do it. And so that gave them confidence, and ultimately the dam broke. But if that's Dak Prescott, that game's probably not close, more likely than not, right? Week 15 against the Saints, Jake Haener stinks, right? I don't know if having Derek Carr in the game would have made a massive difference because Derek Carr stunk last season. You know, sans for the early portion of the season. Derek Carr was ass last year. The Saints as a whole were ass last season. Decimated by injuries. And that's probably not fair to the Saints because before all of the injuries started to take effect, they were actually scoring a bunch of points and being a very disruptive offense. Injuries started to take effect and they became a shell of themselves. And by the time we got to them, there wasn't anything left. Jake Haener was ass. You could say to yourself, well, Spencer Rattler came in and he started to kick our ass. Touche. But had he started the game, we would have game planned for him. Probably would have been better prepared to deal with Spencer Rattler. But because we were prepared for Jake Haener, who stinks, it hurt us when they made the switch to Spencer Rattler at halftime. So that was a game. And then you go to week 16. Obviously, we kind of made this break, but Jalen Hurts gets hurt. And it's Kenny Pickett instead of Jalen Hurts. And again, We weren't trying to hear it then. I'm still not trying to hear it now, but who are we fooling, right? You're not kidding anyone if you say with a healthy Jalen Hurts, is the outcome of that game different? The answer is probably yes. But that's nor here nor there. The bottom line is we took advantage of that opportunity, right? We took advantage of that opportunity. Week 17, Kirk Cousins doesn't play. And at the time, we would have much rather Kirk Cousins been in the lineup than Michael Penix Jr. Cousins had lost all confidence. He was a shell of himself. He was throwing interceptions. He was seeing ghosts. He was a mess. So we would have much rather played Kirk. And if I'm not mistaken, we had never beaten Kirk since he left. So it was a great opportunity to kick him while he was down. We didn't get the opportunity. He got benched the week prior. Penix came in there and gave them a lift. But the real help to us was the fact that Young Wei Koo, the Falcons' Pro Bowl kicker, who was not great last year, I will admit, but one thing he did do last season was hit bombs like he always does from 50 plus and further. He won them at least 2 games with like 54 yarders. I can very vividly remember a Saints game early in the season where he wasn't good early, but when they needed him late, he drilled it from like 56. What happened late in the game? I think they got into 54-yard field goal range, 56, something like that. Sent Riley Patterson out there, former commander, who we all know doesn't have the leg strength in his ass. Never was a doubt in my mind he was going to miss from that distance. And you could also argue that Raheem Morris's botchery of the clock put them in a position where they couldn't get closer. That was also a break for us, but I digress. And then number 8, or number 7 in the final one, week 18 against the Cowboys, obviously Trey Lance. We didn't need the game, but we wanted it because we wanted the 6th seed. So again, no Dak Prescott, right? So number 7, opposition's injury misfortune, that benefited the Commanders last season. Number 6, long drives. The Commanders, and I was in the process of getting the numbers for you on these long drives the Commanders had last season, but I ran out of time and I didn't want to hear you guys bitching about me being late. So I had to cut my research short on that one. But we all can kind of play the games back in our heads as to how many long drives the Commanders went on. It was a gift and a curse, these long drives were, because on one hand, sustaining these long drives kept the defense off the field, helped us with time of possession. And a lot of times these long drives wore the opposition down. They ended in touchdowns, and it allowed us to kind of control the pace of the game. On the other hand, these long drives are a result of the inability to have, explosive plays, catch and runs that turn into big plays, chunk plays that shorten drives. It forced us to have to go for it on 4th downs quite a bit, forced us into a number of 3rd downs as well. And also it kind of hid our defense. So there was this false sort of bravado from our defensive coordinator at times where he acted as if the defense wasn't trash because statistically they just weren't on the field a ton. So while we have a top 5 pass defense, we all know the truth. That ain't no damn top 5 pass defense. So you can't count on long drives. And that's part of the reason why as soon as the season was over and I said, how do you close the gap against Philadelphia? The first thing I said is you got to go out and get somebody that can make something happen with the ball in their hands. Case in point, they go out and acquire Deebo Samuel. So long drives. And the next 3, so long drives is the first of 3 that kind of feed into each other, sort of a domino effect, if you will. So number 5, 4th down conversions. You can't, as a lay fan of the Commanders, expect for them to do what they did on fourth downs last year. Now, as a diehard fan, you know that that's not something that you can replicate again. You can be very efficient on fourth downs. You set an NFL record last year for fourth down conversion percentage with more than 20 attempts in a season. You went 20 of 23 for 87% on fourth downs. That is unheard of. You can't possibly replicate that again. While we want them to remain aggressive on fourth downs, there's no way they can keep up that pace. I don't even want them having to attempt that many fourth downs again, right? I'd like that number to come down to somewhere in the 15 to 17 range. Like 23 is way too high. That's number one. And then number two, you're not going to complete almost 90% of your fourth down conversions, right? You're not going to do that. So that goes back to these long drives. Maybe you don't have to have as many fourth down attempts and subsequent conversions if you don't have to have all these long drives. But you can't assume that we're going to be able to replicate that kind of success on fourth downs. I would love to. And I'm hoping that DQ remains aggressive and we remain efficient on fourth down. But you're fooling yourself if you think it's going to look like that again. I'll be shocked if we are that efficient on fourth downs again next year. Which goes to the next one, which again, I've said those last two and this one kind of feed into one another. Domino effect. You can't in 2025 expect the Commanders to not punt. Okay. We didn't punt in 2024. It was hilarious. We went weeks without punting the football. We didn't punt in the divisional round game against the Detroit Lions. Not one time. I think I lied. We punted once to start the second half. We punted once in that game. En route to 45 points. That's the type of time we were on in 2024. We went a whole 2 weeks without punting. And in that span of a month, from weeks 2 to week 6, or 3 weeks, Cleveland, I think we punted all of twice in that span. So, again, we average the least amount of punts per play, tied with the Detroit Lions, and we average the least amount of punts per score, also tied with the Lions this past season. We didn't punt. Okay. Translation, we didn't punt. Now, I'm not telling you that's not sustainable, because if you continue to be a prolific offense and you continue to score the ball, Tressway won't be out there. But again, you're not going to convert as many fourth downs, which allows you to hold on to the ball, which allows you to keep your punter off the field. We also were dynamic in the kick return game. I'm not saying that we won't be, but that's another factor, because when Austin Eckler, who was an all-pro as a kick returner last year, is breaking off 55-yard kick returns, you're one first down away from field goal range. So you're not going to punt on that possession. Either you're going to kick the field goal or you're going to go for it on fourth down, because you're already in that space, right? So we had a lot of reasons as to why we didn't punt the football. Very prolific offense, sustained drives, converted on fourth downs, excellent on special teams in terms of the returns game, which set up great field position, put you in a position where, hey, shit, it's 4th and 4, but we're already in plus territory, kind of in no man's land. You're not going to gain a lot of yards from punting the ball where we are. You might as well go for it, right? You can't assume that we're going to be as prolific offensively and be in a position where we don't punt the football next year. I just won't bank on it. I hope that's the case, but you can't expect that to be the case again, right? Number 3. the Commanders can't rely on winning the coin toss and or receiving the ball to start the second half. This was an anomaly last season. It's funny because shout out to my girl, Condo P, Miss P. We would watch the games together, obviously, with the mob. Shout out to the mob. You know what it is. Stand up. We in the building. So I would show up right as the game would start, and Miss P would be like, yes, we got the ball. We won the toss, which we actually didn't know if we won the toss. They usually tell you, like the broadcast team usually says, the Commanders won the toss and elected to defer. So the Bucks will get the ball to start, or the Bucks won the toss, but they elected to receive. So the Commanders will kick off. Here we go, right? They usually tell you that, but we really didn't give a shit who won, who lost the toss, as long as we were getting the ball to start the second half, right? So I was like really interested to see just how many times we actually won the toss this past season, because it seemed like most games we were kicking off, or we were deferring to the second half, or we were going to somehow end up with the ball to start the second half. And so I went and I charted every single coin toss from this season. In the regular season, the Commanders won the toss 11 times. 11 times the Commanders won the toss. First of all, that is ridiculous. Okay. Second of all, they lost the first two tosses of the season, in week 1 against Tampa, week 2 against the Giants. And then they won the next 11 out of 12 coin tosses, including 7 in a row. That was broken up by a lost coin toss in week 10. And then they won the next 4 coin tosses in weeks 11, 12, 13, and 15. So 11 coin tosses won, which they deferred every single one of them. So keep in mind, if we win the coin toss, you know what DQ is going to do. He's going to defer to the second half, which is the right move, right? I don't give a damn how good you feel about your offense. I don't care, unless you know that the other team is a front runner, and if you punch them in the mouth first, they're going to crumble. I want no parts of the football to start the game. So deferring is the absolute right move. Here's the thing that's really interesting. Of the 6 times they lost the toss in the regular season, 3 of those times, so half of those times when they lost the toss, the team that won the coin toss decided to receive. So the Commanders still got the ball after half. So in 14 of the Commanders' 17 contests in 2024, we received the second half kickoff. That's not happening again next year, right? That's not happening again next year. And then into the playoffs, we lost the toss all 3 times. But Tampa Bay, as they did in week 1, won the toss and decided to receive. Won the toss and decided to receive. And guess what? The Lions did in the divisional round. Won the toss and decided they wanted the ball first. A lot of teams going with the aggressive, we want the football. I don't know if you're going to get that same type of energy next year. And I don't know if you're going to win the toss, 11 out of 17 times. And I don't know if when you do lose the toss, you're going to get a bunch of teams that want the football first, right? Analytics guy for the coin toss. That's hilarious. Number 2. This is a big one, and I hope I'm wrong about this. But the Commanders probably aren't going to be able to rely on elite health. in 2025. Last year was one of the healthiest Commanders teams we've seen in quite some time. We didn't have a lot of long-term injuries. We avoided the injury bug for most of the season. When guys did get hurt, they ultimately came back. The worst injury that we thought we had during the season was Jonathan Allen. We thought he lost him for the season. He ends up coming back in the season finale against, I want to say he was back for the Atlanta game, maybe, right? But he was back late in the season, either Atlanta or the Dallas game in week 18. So he was back before the regular season was over. And we thought we lost him for the year. We were relatively healthy last year. You know, Noah Brown got hurt. That was a significant injury, but he'd already played the first 10, 11 games before that injury took place. So we were a relatively healthy team last year. We had nicks and bruises like everyone else, but there were no long-term injuries. Guys came back. They fought through injuries. We made it to the finish line. We were the 5th best team in the league in terms of games lost to injury. So we were pretty healthy last season. Can that happen again? Sure, it could. But I'm not counting on it. And the beauty is we have more depth than we had a year ago. So if it does hit us a little bit harder this year, we are in a better position to withstand it. We're not looking for it. We don't want the smoke. If you're listening, Injury Reaper, you know you got my respect. I don't want no trouble. I don't want no problems, right? So spare us, please. But ultimately, this is why you add depth to your roster. This is why you continue to build your roster up so that you can insulate yourself in the case of injury becoming an issue. I think we're better equipped to doing that this year. So it's something that we really couldn't afford last year. We just didn't have the depth. And we were fortunate enough that it wasn't an issue. If it happens this year, we're better equipped to deal with it, but you want your frontline guys out there. You want your starters available. And the number one thing the Commanders cannot rely on in 2025 is luck. Luck. John Keim had a podcast episode recently where he had Sam Fortier, who is leaving the beat to become a national writer for the Washington Post. But before he left, he dropped a gem on John's podcast. And he basically talked about luck. And there was this like luck index or something, I forget what it's called, that he was referencing. And I went on a different site and looked up luck, because the site that he was on, they started keeping this statistic back in 2022. And the Commanders were not only number one last year in luck, they were also the highest on that luck index in its history, since its inception in 2022. So that, speaks volumes as to how things kind of went the Commanders' way. Now, this particular luck index takes into consideration specific things. So you might look at one luck index, it's got us 5th, which I looked at one and it had us 5th. Like, in my mind, nobody was more lucky than the Kansas City Chiefs last year. That's how I feel. Like, nobody won more close games. Nobody got away with more bullshit than the Kansas City Chiefs. And the luck index that I was referencing had us at 5th and the Chiefs at 1, right? That seems more accurate to me. But at the end of the day, no one's turning down luck. And a wise man once told me it's better to be lucky than good. And I've always been a proponent of Luck is the intersection of preparation and opportunity. And the opportunity presents itself. If you're ready to take advantage of it, you can be lucky too. But who are we kidding? Right? We were one of the most luckiest teams in the league last season. That is a fact. So let's talk about some of the instances that were flat out luck for this team. So obviously week 2, we've talked about it already, but the Giants not having a kicker is lucky, right? Like getting injured and not having a kicker all game. But forget about that. Move that aside. That index that Sam Fortier talked about, it took into consideration fumbles and recoveries of fumbles, dropped interceptions, dropped passes by the opponent, things of that nature, right? So Malik Neighbors drop. I've already said this. Malik Neighbors drop in week 2. Wide ass open, by the way. Wide ass open. Is season defining for the Commanders. If he catches that football, we're 0-2 because they're going to score a touchdown. You know what this defense was in the fourth quarter of ball games. Daniel Jones was walking the ball up and down the field. We were going to lose that game. Okay. At the time, it was tied at 18. So we were going to have to, I think we only had one timeout left. They were going to be able to burn pretty much all the clock. They didn't have a field goal kicker, but they were going to punch that hoe in. They were going to score a touchdown. They were going to go for 2, probably get the shit. Probably not, because we actually were the best. And it was something else I thought about. We were the best 2-point conversion defense in the league last season. Teams went for 2 against us 5 times, and we stopped 4 of them last year. So maybe they wouldn't have gotten it. Who cares? Right? Who cares? We would have lost the game. That's what would have been important. We'd have been 0-2 heading to Cincinnati without any momentum, and we wouldn't have scored 38 points that night, and we wouldn't have beat the Bengals, and we would have been 0-3, and the season would have been going to hell in a handbasket. Instead, Malik Neighbors drops a football, wide ass open. Jaden Daniels then has his first career game-winning drive. The rest is history, and the Cinderella season commences, right? It's a massive play in our season. You continue on through the rest of the season, and there's so many different points of luck in our journey. I know Sam pointed out one that I had absolutely forgot about, even though we still lost this game. Clearly, the Washington walk-off, aka Bear Trap, aka Noah's Ark, is luck, right? The fact that, like, that was divine intervention. The fact that Stevenson decides to go talk to the crowd, not paying attention when they snap the ball. He then runs over, gets a running start, jumps in the air, and it's his hand that tips it back to Noah Brown for the catch. All of that shit was pure luck. Also, you know, bad management by the Bears head coach, backing his players up, giving us an extra, 12 yards, which Tony Romo said, hey, they're giving you these 12 yards. You got enough time. You hit the out, get out of bounds. It'll give you an opportunity to actually reach the end zone. They mismanaged all of that, right? That was luck, right? Obviously, that was luck. You continue on. Week number 10 against the Steelers. They dropped, the Steelers did, a wide open. Remember, they faked a punt early in that game. They were up 7-0. They had us on the ropes. They fake a punt, and the guy is wide ass open. I forgot about this one. I had forgotten all about this play. And he drops it. And it gave us tremendous field position. Like, we started at the Steeler 18-yard line after that. They caught us off guard with our pants down. And because they threw it to a guy with bricks for hands, we got away with it. Right? That's lucky. But I feel like, in the ebbs and flows of a season, you give it, you take it away. because we muffed a punt in that game. I thought we got jerked on the Zach Ertz play at the end of that game. So there was things that went both ways, but ultimately that was lucky too, right? But we didn't win that game, so it didn't matter. You keep going throughout the season. Obviously, week 15 against New Orleans, the 2-point conversion. Like I said, we stopped 4 out of 5 attempts. The only one we gave up in 2024 was after the Bears scored the touchdown to go ahead in the game. I think the score was, it was 12. So it was 12. It was 12-7. They scored the touchdown. They went for 2, made it 15-12. We just gave that up because we were demoralized at that point. But on the 2-point conversion by the Saints, that's a drop. Even though it was good defense, that was a drop. Nobody touched the ball. It went off the hands of that receiver. I think it was Juwan Johnson, the tight end. That's a drop. Now, it was a bullet, and it was a tough catch, but it hit his hands. Nobody touched it. That was a drop. The following week against Philadelphia, we've talked about this ad nauseum. If Smitty catches that football, that game's over. They're going to use up the rest of the clock. I think at that time we had 1 timeout left. They run it all the way down. They kick the field goal, and they probably beat us in that game 33-30. I think that's what the score was at the time. I think it was 30-30, I believe. Because we ultimately went for 2 and got it at the end to make it 36. So we were down 30-28. 30-28. We'd have lost the game 33-28. We'd have lost the game 33-28. Instead, he drops the football. So the clock stops. We don't have to use our final timeout. And we get the football back. And we know what happens then. Jaden does what he does best. That was lucky. He was wide ass open. Then the last bit of luck was wild card weekend. Nobody touched Baker Mayfield on that jet sweep handoff. He just fumbled, right? Mismanaged the handoff. Ball hits the ground, and luckily enough for us, Bobby Wagner, again, opportunity meets preparation. Bobby was prepared. Opportunity presented itself. He scooped that fumble up. We get the go-ahead score. That doesn't happen. I'm not saying that we don't win that game, but likely don't win that game, right? So, again, a lot of things happened in favor of the good guys last season. You can't assume that those things are going to transpire again in 2025. We've got to be better. Like, the Bears game should have never come down to a Washington walk-off. Should have never come to a Noah's Ark. Never come down to that. We dominated that game. They had no business being in that game, and you need to finish them. Don't play with your food. Finish it. The Giants had no business being in that game with us. We were walking the ball. We didn't punt the entire game. We were walking it up and down the field, but penalties and mistakes in the red zone cost us, and we had to settle for 7 field goals. Don't put yourself in that position so that you need luck at the end of the game. Sometimes going for it on 4th down bites you in the ass. We went for it in that Tampa game twice on 4th down and didn't get it. But you know what we did too? We went for it 3 more times and we did get it, including the second red zone 4th down attempt in a row on 4th down. And that time, Terry caught the touchdown to go ahead score. You live by the 4th down, you die by it. I love it. Be who you are. I loved it when Dan Campbell did it in Detroit, and people killed him for that. Maybe he was a little over-aggressive the first time, but I loved it the second time. Catch the ball. The receiver was open. Reynolds was open. Catch the damn ball. So, again, you would like to just be good. That's the goal, but luck is a part of the game, and none of us are turning it down. And again, these things sort of even themselves out. You get some plays that go in your favor, then some plays don't go in your favor, but a lot of massive plays in football games went our way. I think about some of these. I was watching the Panthers game. I told you guys this earlier on a stream I did earlier. I was watching the Panthers game back. And Austin Seibert hit another one of those fat balls again, where the shit was sputtering and barely made it through the uprights on an extra point. And I you just think to yourself, how many of those shits did he actually make last season? And again, that shit wouldn't have mattered in the Carolina game. But it mattered in the Baltimore game when he missed. Barely made another extra point in the Baltimore game. Missed the field goal because he didn't hit it good. We got lucky last year a few times, for sure. Joe Rockhead, thank you for the super chat. Greatly appreciate you. Thank you for being a member of the MOBB. My guy, Joe Rockhead, writes, if we're going to do luck counts, don't we have to look at how many times the ops were lucky to? And that factors into it. But again, think about the games. Just play them back in your mind. How many times were the opponents lucky in a manner that it allowed them to win the game? Think about that. Play it back in your head. How many games? We only lost 5 games in the regular season, right? Think about how many times the opponents were lucky in those 5 losses that we had. So we could go through the 5 losses, right? First loss of the season was to Tampa. Wasn't no luck involved in that. We weren't ready for that first game of the season. Offensively, we weren't ready. Defensively, we weren't ready. And there's nothing to see here, right? Week 6 against Baltimore. You tell me if there was some luck involved in that game. I know there was a pass interference call that I thought was bogus on Benjamin St-Juste that extended a drive that would have given us the football and an opportunity to tie the game down 27-20. But guess what? We had a pass interference penalty called on them on a 4th down when we threw it to Noah Brown in a desperation situation. So it evens out. I just remember us not being able to stop Derrick Henry when we needed to stop, and not being able to stop Lamar Jackson and Zay Flowers and Rashad Bateman when we needed to stop. That's what I remember. So you go to our next loss, the 3-game loser streak, Pittsburgh. That's the one where you go, okay, some lucky shit happened there. To me, right? Jaden missed a pass to Luke McCaffrey, and Steelers fans would tell you, well, he was supposed to miss the pass because it was a holding in the end zone on Andrew Wiley on TJ Watt, which it was. That should have been a safety that they didn't call, and the football gods simply righted or wrong. I got no problems with that. The Zach Ertz call was bogus. A lot of crazy shit happened in that game on both sides. But outside of the Zach Ertz call, which, again, we had a lot of shit go our way in that game. Jalen Warren fumbling the ball as they're about to go score a touchdown in the 4th quarter. Like that wasn't supposed to happen, but it did, right? The fake punt that they dropped that was wide open, like, so it goes both ways, right? We lost the next week to Philadelphia. I mean, I don't remember any luck involved in that one. Do you? Oh, I will say we forced a fumble. There's like 4 Commanders around the ball, and somehow Grant Calcaterra comes out of nowhere like a damn eagle, swoops in and recovers the bitch. That was pretty damn lucky, if I may say so myself. Outside of that, there wasn't a lot of luck involved. We made mistakes. They capitalized off of it. The following week, against Dallas, we had every opportunity to beat the Cowboys in that game. I mean, how lucky do you have to be to complete an 86-yard pass with no timeouts and 30 seconds left in the game? Like, are you kidding me? Like, we squandered another opportunity to be lucky. I mean, that was skill on the part of Jaden and Terry and all of that, but our kicker wasn't good in that game, and he missed. You want to call that luck? Sure, go ahead. I won't tell you you're wrong. How about not giving up a kickoff return for a touchdown? How about doing that too? But we had our opportunities in that game. John Bates fumbled in that game. So, yeah. I'm with you, Brian. We should have never kicked. I was saying all week long, Dan Quinn, you know this guy, don't kick to him. And his ego and his bravado got in the way. I love my group. I want to give them, and I get it. Like, if you swear by your group and you believe in them, you can't say, hey, I think y'all are the best special teams coverage unit in the league, but I don't think you're good enough to tackle Kavontae Turpin. What message does that send to your team? So I get it. You can't say that we're built on competing and we want all of the heavy hitters, and then you get a heavy hitter and you're scared. I just wouldn't have kicked to him. But that's not how DQ is wired, and I get it. I get it. And then the last loss of the season, no, that was the last loss of the regular season. That Cowboys game. I mean, if you want to count that as unlucky, I'm listening. It was a lot of crazy shit happened in that game that kind of evened it out, I believe. And then if you want to say the Eagles NFC Championship game was unlucky, okay. I mean, how many damn times can you fumble in a game, right? I mean, I definitely thought that was an unlucky game for us. It felt like all of the luck that we had throughout the course of the year was reversed on us in that game in particular. I mean, stupid shit happened. Like, we get a stop. Like, first of all, Saquon, he hog ties. He might as well have put him in a damn $1 million dream on 4th down. He absolutely grabs Frankie Louvu on that 4th and 5. You call that flag, it changes the entire game. We had all the momentum at that point. Down 14-12. They would have had to punt the ball. The game literally changed on that no call. But even to go further, we had them stop for a field goal. They call Mikey for unnecessary roughness or unsportsmanlike conduct, I guess, hitting him late out of bounds. And, you know, they slowed it down. His foot hadn't touched out of bounds yet. It was probably the right call, though. But whatever. Like, we had him stop for a field goal. That turned into a touchdown. Then, I think that was the second time, right? The first time they just went down, scored a touchdown after the 4th and 5 conversion. Then after that, how unlucky could you be? I mean, Jeremy McNichols returns the kickoff and runs into the back of his own player and fumbles the ball. Like, no Eagle defender touched him. He just ran up the back of his own player and fumbled. Like, that's crazy to me. First of all, I want to know why the K balls are so goddamn slick. I know they're new balls. How about you don't use those for kickoffs? Like, if you want to use those for extra points, field goals, hey, have at it. Don't use those for kickoffs when somebody has to actually handle the football. Anyway, that was unfortunate. Then you get the Mikey Sainristil penalty. Instead of it being 27-12, instead of it being 23-12, it's 27-12 because they end up getting a touchdown after the Mikey penalty. Then Jaden takes us down the field in like 39 seconds with no timeouts and gets us a field goal to make it 27-15. And, you know, it's unfortunate that Jaden scratches claws, gets us within, 11 points at 34-23, and then Eckler fumbles. Yeah, Diami fumbled at the beginning of the game. I mean, shit happens, right? Ultimately, there weren't many instances where the opposition benefited from being lucky. I'll tell you one. Olamide Zaccheaus had a drop against Dallas in the end zone that would have been a touchdown. And I still believe we ended up scoring a touchdown on that possession. I could be wrong. But I think we ended up scoring a touchdown anyway, so it didn't really make a big difference. But at the time, we were cussing them out because we were struggling mightily on offense at the time. But that was one instance where you could consider that luck because that should have been a touchdown. And then OZ had a drop against the Falcons at the end of regulation when Jaden was going to try to take us down the field and get us in the field goal range to win it. And he dropped it, and the Falcons got the football, and they almost beat us because of that drop. Now, ultimately, it didn't hurt us. They didn't get the field goal, went to overtime, won the toss, and the rest is history. But that could have been catastrophic too. So, again, it evens out in certain instances, but ours were so huge. And again, with luck, it also comes down to, did you take advantage of the opportunity? Right? Because if you see a $20 bill on the ground as you walk out of your house, but you don't pick it up, you were lucky, but you didn't complete the luck, right? Or you see the $20 bill, but it's really windy outside and it starts to blow away from you and you can't get it. So you were lucky, but did you complete the luck? I don't know. Maybe that's another conversation for another day, but I digress. Anyway, that's going to do it for me, your man Louie T, here on this installment of the Command Post Live. You know what it is. Post up, take command. I look forward to chopping it up with you next time. There's going to be a bunch of uploads throughout the course of the rest of this week. I've been extremely busy, so I'm going to churn out a bunch of content for you. So just be on the lookout. Make sure you're watching. Make sure you're liking. Make sure you're commenting. I've got 2 more Louie's lurking because we had some videos where comment participation and viewer participation was extremely important for those particular videos because I literally asked a question and I got a ton of feedback and responses from you guys. It was awesome. So I had to separate those videos because they were going to be so long on if I combined them as one. So I separated them to keep them somewhat equal. I think they're going to end up probably being roughly 45 minutes a piece instead of an hour and 30 for just one, right? So it's a little bit more digestible. So you'll get that over the next couple of days. I got a few more videos coming out. So just be on the lookout. Just be on the lookout. A lot of content coming your way as we wrap up the month of June and turn the calendar to July. And we know we're getting ever so close to the start of the upcoming season. Once we hit the 7th month of the year, the best month of the year. Anyway, y'all know what it is. I really, truly do appreciate you guys, as always. Shout out to the mob. Y'all know what it is. Stand up. We in the building. Post up. Take command. I will see you guys next time. Until then, I'm your man, Louie T, signing off. Peace. Better to be lucky than good. Sometimes. I guess.